I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
In this December 18th, 2005 debriefing by Dan's scientific assistant, Marcia McDowell, Dan tells how he took tissue samples from the JRod with a pressurized extraction gun. He goes on to explain in great detail how the extraction gun device was constructed. Then he describes the necessary protocols for suiting up to enter the hyperbolic clean sphere. Toward the end of the time he spent with the JRod in 1995, the JRod approached him unexpectedly, which caused Dan to panic and stumble backwards onto his back, after which the JRod climbed up on his chest and looked deeply into Dan's eyes, flooding him with valuable information about Earth's exotic past and possible catastrophic future. In this series, you will learn information never before made public. Astonishing, amazing, earth-shaking, yes, but it's simply the truth. Because this information is so revolutionary, there are many disinformation specialists on the internet attacking Dan's credibility.
Well, when you know that these people are out there and they're making a concerted effort to try to undermine any work that you're trying to accomplish, before it even has a hearing by the general public, before it's ever evaluated on its own merit, then you have to ask yourself, why are they so very afraid to even listen? If they don't know what you're about to say, but if they know what you're going to say is straight down the line, and they are terrified that you're going to let something out, then it becomes a lot clearer why they're going to these lengths to try to derail any work that you're doing.
Well, I really think that trying to size them up, that they care little about whether or not I'm even telling the truth. As soon as it triggered a certain point of interest, that's where they go to work no matter what.
Because it's what I'm trying to get at is that if somebody is talking through their hat and they have nothing of value to say, they don't get into gear.
Oh, no.
They don't bother. They don't bother with people that really don't have anything to say.
No, those people are actually serving their overall purpose.
But when you have somebody gaining traction who has something to say, and they know it.
Well, most UFO accounts don't make it to the public, and I don't, like I said, I don't consider my account a UFO account. It's all IFO. But most don't make it to the public, and this account sure stands a high likelihood
of making it to the public.
And so they're going to be targeting.
And they don't want it to make it to the public, or they want it to make it in such a way that it would be fractured. And it's our obligation, our objective, to make sure that it gets intact.
Well, see, that's one thing that they actually suggested. Not they, but people whom fallen under the influence of that group being possibly, having any redeemable value at all. And then it was suggested to me, well, maybe you should go through this reptile account, this Project Serpo account, and actually evaluate it. And I said, no, I don't want to evaluate nonsense.
No.
I know that it didn't happen. I know that it's nonsense. I have heard different modules for disinformation, and that is one of the spins that I heard years ago for disinformation. So when it popped up and I heard about it, I knew exactly what it was, and that's why I could easily just say, well, the next one's going to be this or that. It's going to be DROPO, and which stands for Operational Order. So the next one is going to be DROPO. Then they're probably going to relate that to the Dropa stones and say that's where that comes from. It is, and I labeled this word on it, it's bullshit.
Yes.
So that's where it sets. What are we gonna?
Well, we have enough time to talk about getting suited up to go and see the JRod, or
Okay.
possibly discussing a little bit about Majestic.
Very little. Okay. I know what people want. I also know
Yeah.
what
And
I've
then
got
people want what
parameters.
they want, and then there are things that we can talk about.
The basic procedure, if you will, we would meet on the level 4 in the briefing room, and if we had samples which needed to be removed from the JRod, the A and B team would be picked. The A team is the actual person who does the introduction into the clean sphere, with a single helper standing behind him until he gets into the gantry. And the B team handles anything else which is required on the floor at the time.
Okay.
It's a backup team. If I was, for instance, picked to do the introduction, which I had several, I would then proceed straight down the hallway past all of the biocontainment levels, and down in the elevator to the floor, and walk down the stairs to the actual floor where the clean sphere would be either being raised up or already being positioned. There was a physician and a nurse who would check me out, do a general evaluation on me, breathe in, breathe out. And
Was this at the clean sphere, or is this
right
in a
around the
separate
corner from it.
in a separate room?
Yes, right around the corner to the right. And then you would walk out between the area which would be the overlook over the clean sphere and the wall that was actually set up with the equipment for the samples to head up. But I would be given an EKG, set up on a heart monitor. The leads would go to the equipment pack, which would be strapped around me after I was suited. I was catheterized and plugged, which was the most uncomfortable portion of the whole operation, next to the helmet. They had only limited numbers of suits which were available. They're extremely expensive moon suits. Basically, we're talking not a level 4 biocontainment positive pressure suit. We're talking a spacesuit for all intents and purposes. I would be put in a special jumper, and this is after the plugging and the catheterizing. In other words, I was stripped down. And after the jumper, I would be suited. The suit had a central feature, which would wrap around my torso and be locked and zipped around my torso. Then separate legs and separate arms would be added on with swivel locks. Then I would essentially be in an entire moon suit. The boots to the moon suit didn't separate. It was part of the actual leg, which would be locked and hooked on. Then I would have the helmet locked over the top, which just looked like a bell with a halo, if you will, a heavy rubberized halo stuck up into the top of the bell. And I would be checked out with with pressure. I'd be pressurized. After that worked, I would be depressurized, the helmet would be taken off, and I would have my communications gear put on, and then bell back on, relocked, and repressurized. At that point, I would be walked with my other A person out onto the floor in front of the clean sphere. By then, I could already see the JRod over in the corner, and we were giving each other mental waves at the time. I should probably explain that we were not supposed to be communicating whatsoever, but as soon as I got out on the floor near the clean sphere, we were in communication with one another.
Really unknown to
the crew.
The crew.
Then walked up the gantry, which was placed in position to an interlock device on the side of the clean sphere, and walked up to the top and put into the little room almost. It's almost like a closet. There I would then hook up to the secondary oxygen system, which was able to be swiveled in a beveled area at the front of the gantry, so that when I entered into the clean sphere, I was actually hooked to the central portion of the gantry area. I would pressurize myself up, and when I was comfortable with the oxygen flow, the atmospheric flow, I would then decouple myself from the external device that I walked in with. Why we had to pressurize up before getting into the gantry was because if there was a failure of the system before I would be hooked in on the inside of the clean sphere, that I could potentially have nothing to breathe until they could get me out, so I could suffocate. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was previously hosed up, as they called it.
So when
and they joke, where there was jokes that was going on, they were going on the floor. You know, who gets hosed over tonight? Those sort of jokes, and that's what we called it when we actually rotated the drum inside. Is we would say, okay, I'm hosed over. That's what the joke was on the floor. So we would then pressurize up the atmosphere on the inside of the gantry, and then the door would be opened. I would then rotate the drum over, and I would manually close the door from top to bottom. It was a rotating, it actually opened this way, not sideways. And I would manually close the door, and then they would check to make sure that the interlock pressure in that gantry was made normal, that there was no leaking. Once I was introduced into the clean sphere, I would have my equipment with me, and there was a secondary hose which came out of the bottom by the gantry area, but it was fixed as part of the clean sphere, that the B unit would then be hooking up to transfer the samples up to the 3rd floor. It wouldn't go initially up to the 4th floor where you would run the samples. They would go up to the 3rd floor where the culture was actually held. And then they would be run back down to the 4th floor when we were working in the biocontainment laboratories. We would then hook the back of the PINS tube, which was a port, if you will, to our PINS system, our aspirative avulsion system. That acted as the drawing pressure for the needle. The next thing that I was supposed to do immediately after that was shuffle 2 steps to my right, and I was to raise my right hand. At the same time, projected as a teleprompter into the clean sphere's glass was a picture of a human being holding his hand up, and Sigma-approved symbols that this was a message of friendship. Well, I would go through this. I went through it the first time, and as I did it the first time, he asked me, "Why are you doing that?" Now, I was not able to verbally answer him, but I looked at him, and I said, "Because I'm told to, in here."
Yeah.
And he would go like that. He was actually laughing. That was his way of laughing. After the JRod would accept the offer for friendship, which would be his hand being raised up. And finally, it almost got to the point where he'd go, you have to know his behavior to know how flippant he was being, because he had very controlled behaviors.
I see.
And he would raise his little 4 digits up, and then I would be permitted then to walk from my position to him and carry out my duties, which he had been previously told what the duties were for that particular introduction. The bottom line is, as I was walking toward him, he was saying, "So you're going to remove sample from right appendage?" And I'd say, "Yes, sir." And while we were getting to know each other, he told me his private name, and I told him my name, and he wanted to learn about me, and he showed me a little bit about his growing up in Reticulum, and the beanie,
Mm-hmm.
the beanie line came up because he wanted to know some things from my childhood, and I recalled a favorite cartoon, which was Cecil, the seasick sea serpent.
And Beanie.
And Beanie Boy.
Beanie Boy.
And so I replayed a little bit for him in my head what I remembered from one of the episodes with Cecil yelling, "I'm coming, Beanie Boy," to help Beanie out. And so he started calling me BNE because he separated his words that way,
Right.
naturally, from his actual learning of English from us. So he called me BNE most of the time. He didn't call me Dan or Danny or my childhood nickname all the way up to now, Boo Boo. He didn't. I told him those things, but I shared those things with him, but he called me BNE. And part of the reason why he, I think, associated with me as BNE is because the B team, when the B team was on the floor, Polly was there, and I looked over my shoulder one time, and Polly used to wear a hat with a beanie, and I actually have the propeller hat from him.
Propeller, yes.
He subsequently passed away during an accident up at the facility. But anyway, I looked over my shoulder, and he said, "Beanie that." And I looked over my shoulder, and I told him no, because Polly had a beanie hat that had a bill on the front of it. And the beanie hat that I was thinking about, that I was showing him from Beanie Boy,
It just had
was
the,
just a cap with the propeller.
With the propeller.
And so we had that discussion. Now, what I had with me in my case, depending upon the number of samples to be removed in locations, and that was established in briefing before I would ever come down onto the floor. I had it rehearsed, and we had to physically go through a rehearsal of what we were going to do. And that was filmed and recorded, so if we deviated from the procedures, everybody would know. So the only deviation I had from any of the procedures was actually, aside from falling over backward at one time, and that was his deviation, not mine, because he stepped toward me.
He stepped toward you.
And he was not supposed to. The only deviation was the actual conversations, the personal relationship that I had with him. In any case, let's say I had one sample to remove, which never happened. It was always multiples. I had a measuring device with me, and I would measure the area on his upper appendage and actually mark it off with my thumb, using my thumb, for lengths down the arm and the position on either the biceps or going down into the brachioradialis, where a lot of the samples were removed. And these sample removals were not chosen by us. They were chosen by the committee above us, by the cover committee. So we were being told, and they were interacting with the wise men up there. And we were basically told, you will evaluate what we give you to evaluate. So we evaluated that on our own, in our own style, of course, but we were told what we were going to be evaluating. It wasn't a situation of, well, I could make a call and try to get a sample from this location. No. We were told explicitly. Well, what I would do then is I would remove one of the vials. They were pressurized vials from the kit, and make sure that it was matching the area that I would have a sample removal from. Then I would add that vial into the top of my pins gun. It looked almost like a needle gun. And I would snap the vial down into the front of the pins gun, where the front of the vial would then be penetrated by the needle, the inside of the needle.
Yes.
And the front of the needle was not uncapped at that point. It was actually set where it was sealed. The next thing that I would do is I would snap the back of the needle into the back of the port, there was an actual back of it had a rear entry point as well. And that was hooked to the pressurization unit. And I would close the top of the pin system. As soon as I would close the top of the pin system, I would then open the valve to the pressurization unit, which would cause the pull of the sample. After that, once I knew where the needle introduction would go, I would break the tip of the needle off.
Break the tip of the needle off.
It was a metal needle, and it was serrated, it was crimped, if you will. So I would actually break the tip of the needle off, and that for the first time would then open up the port
Yes.
to the front of the vial. I would then insert into the appropriate location in the into the JRod the needle. After I would insert the needle, I would then squeeze the needle gun, and when I would squeeze the needle gun, what that would do is it would allow from the back of the needle, there was a pressurization valve at the back of the needle. It would then open up the back of the needle's pressurization valve right before the little tube for the sample. It would open that up to the outside. Once it opened that up to the outside, meaning now inside of the JRod, that would then open up the pressurization pulling this direction, and it would only do it for a moment. So I would squeeze it, it would click inward, and it would open and close. When it would open and close, that would cause the pressurization to suck backward, and it would suck a small amount of tissue into the vial. So that was the actual pin system. It was called a pressurized induction needle system.
Was it a single needle?
It was a single needle.
Okay.
It was a single needle. They had other systems, multiple barrels, but we never used them. There were protocols for it, but maybe they were done on him, I don't know, but I never did. I never did. And what I mean by a barrel, it almost looked like a pepper box for multiple removals. And there were pin systems for that as well. Now, once that sample was removed, then I had to step back, remove the needle from the JRod, step back and lock the pressurization off, open the system up, and actually remove the sample. Okay. I would then take the sample over to that little induction area, and I would pop the sample into the induction area, the vial, if you will, and then the B officer on the floor for the backup unit would then turn a switch, causing that sample to then be sucked to the outside of the clean sphere. It was sucked into another container. Then that entire container was then moved to the sort of thing you run into at a bank.
At a bank, where they send your thing up.
Exactly so. They would then send that up to the third floor, up to culture. Okay? And they had a total series of protocols up in culture. They had a bio-level 4 containment unit in the corner of the culture area across from the dissection and autopsy area. And that would then be handled in a glove box and then moved from that glove box, because there were induction ports in the side of the glove box, to sample containers for culture, and then that could be then sucked back down to the 4th level into BL4.
For examination.
For examination in the cabinet lab.
Now, we're talking about a small sample of living tissue.
Yes, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just follow one sample. There were multiples which were removed and then handled from 4 or 5 up to 3 and then back down to 4.
But we're talking about a sample of tissue that is alive. So that's one of the reasons it had to be handled so carefully.
And rapidly. That's exactly so. Now, these vials did not have any culture media in them whatsoever, the PINS vials that we added to our PINS guns. So they had to be in a cabinet. They had to be removed from the vial and actually placed into a growth media for evaluation and marked, and there were personnel setting up on floor 3 that just did that job. They were the sample handlers. They were culture experts is what they were. And they had the protocols which were already set up ahead of time for what size sample was to be placed in what variety of culture.
When
you have specialized enhanced culture media and selective growth.
Selective growth media. When you removed the sample and removed the needle from his arm, was there any exudate? Did he bleed? What did it look like?
It looked red and white. And usually the white material was some of his internal muscle material, or it was usually a little bit of muscle material that would squirt out. and I never covered him over, so I imagine any of the cleansing of the area and all of that was done prior to him either being brought up to the fourth level, the Clevesphere level, or after it was done, he would have been taken care of down on in the ambassadorial suite. But there was never a protocol where I would cleanse him or anything like that.
Like swabbing before we would get a needle injection.
He would bleed, and the reason why, to be honest with you, the reason why the majority of the time that we had a small avulsion come out of the hole was because of the rapidness, the rapid pace that I was having to keep to get the samples. We were told work quickly. Do not worry about the pain. Get your sample and get the hell out, is what we were being told. And the reason why that was to decrease the amount of exposure time, and not physical exposure time, but psychological exposure time. The physical exposure, there was no physical exposure. But there was usually a little bit of whitish gray fluid.
I find that kind of hard to visualize because for us, muscles are massive and they don't leak.
Well, the tissue that the JRod, which the JRod is composed, is substantially less dense than a present-day human being. They are substantially more gelatin-like. I can put it that way.
Okay. But yet the muscles function as muscles and the connective tissue functions as connective tissue.
They do.
But it's more
gelatinous. It was not meant to be in our gravitational.
But it had a different texture and different composition.
Indeed it did. And the majority of the time there would be some bleeding, but that was it. These were no larger. The induction ports, the induction needles, were no larger than most of the time than slightly larger than an insulin syringe.
Very small.
What we would use, very small.
So the sample itself that was taken was very small.
It depends on. I could take approximately a tenth of a cubic centimeter on a removal, up to a cubic centimeter, depending upon how long I would hold and refire it, because I could refire it.
Okay. So as you squeeze the gun.
Yeah. So we not only had different injection protocols for where we were supposed to site on the appendage of the JRod, but we also had numbers of samples to be removed from a particular location.
So each time you would squeeze the triggering mechanism, and you would
about a tenth cc
create the pressure through the needle that would draw up the tissue.
Mm-hmm.
You could squeeze it repeatedly to get more tissue.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you needed more for that particular sample.
Yeah, and we were told how much per sample to remove.
Remove.
Yeah. What I was trying to do is just follow a simple, basic technique from start to finish.
I understand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
Okay.
Well, you brought out a good point. I mean, the people are going to want to know that it was done, under repetition, not just single removal per vial. But it depended on what we were instructed to do.
I understand.
In a couple of occasions, there were single removals, but the vast majority of them, there were multiples. What we would then do after a single removal is we would remove now there was a block in the back, a pressurized block in the back of the sample vial. So as the pressure was pulled the sample inward, it wouldn't get past it into the tube. It was a one-way filter system.
Okay.
So the pressurization, the actual suction pressure, that portion of the tube stayed clean. And there was HEPA filtering, virus filtering past it. So if we removed something then and there was any sort of an airborne virus involving the extraterrestrial, it would not have been aspirated into the system. had it have been aspirated into the system and it would have been known, then there would have been a biocontainment problem, and we wouldn't have had to worry about it anyway.
No, because the solution to that kind of a problem.
They feed gas into the room and then they ignite the gas.
And they ignite the gas.
That's right. And that's what the blow-off valves are for when the construction of this facility is
the pressure blow-offs.
put to certainty by the artist that's working on it.
Yes.
In any case, we would get rid of the vial, and it would be sent up, moduled up to culture 3, and then I would have to remove the front of the pins needle, exchange it out, exchange the medium system out because there was a filter in between that as well that would go over the top of it. So all I had to do is pull there were little top vials, like there were like tubes over the top and over the bottom that would actually fit into. We're going to probably have to have the artist draw it. Fit into the front of the vial itself.
Okay.
And a filter in there as well, so that the contamination was relegated only to the needle system and inside of the vial itself.
Okay.
All right, meaning the sample was contained in the vial, but we call it a contamination because that's where the substance actually was, the potentially exotic substance. And so I would tear the front of the needle down, basically, put a new one on, and go through the same system again by removing the front of the needle and removing whatever the sample protocol was from the JRod. Once done, the sample material, the actual used up needles, the Sharpies basically, would remain in my case and would remain inside of the clean sphere after I would leave.
The case would remain inside of the clean sphere.
Yes. I would not walk out of there with the case that I walked in with.
I was going to say, yes, that makes sense.
The next thing that would happen is we would go from 1 over to 2. I had a communications system on. It was like a harness belt around me with a communication system, and I would advise that the ECE contact was completed, and they would tell me, okay, you can wait by the door, meaning the inner door, and I would back myself. I was actually supposed to step slowly backward away from the JRod so as not to scare the JRod. Slowly backward, so I would follow the protocol, and I would walk backward to the door, and I would wait, and then I would be told, fine. The center was then repressurized, and I could then unlock the door and open it up. Now, there was an electronic lock on the inside of that door. It was set electronically, so if I tried to get out myself early, no go. I could not have left. But once approved, then I could step back into the center area. Now comes the tricky protocol. How in the hell am I going to get out from the inside of the containment area with my suit? Because I've been in contact with what?
Exactly, potentially exotic material.
I didn't. The drum would get moved back over. I would then rehook into the external air, and the other hoses would be dropped right there, just left on the inside of the clean sphere, and the door would be locked. Now I'm in this little
Cubby
area. The gantry would be pulled back. The bolts would be removed from the steps to go up to the gantry, and the scissor mechanism would be brought down, so I would actually be brought down in a container. That container was then pushed over. Now I'm breathing external environment. That container would then be pushed over to the outside wall area outside of decon, which is the area where I was first plugged and all of that business. The top of the container would then be cleaned with a rag over a port. Mm-hmm. A tube would then be pulled from the wall, large hose, if you will, up above me now. I'm standing there and I'm breathing the outside air. It was pressurized. It was a separate system. It was a highly controlled and a separate positive pressure system. But outer air, meaning not inside of the clean sphere anymore. And the entire area that I was standing in would be filled, liquid. And there I would stand for 15 to 20 minutes, move around, and I was in a bathing liquid. It was a decon facility. Then a hose would be added to the side of this gantry area, and it would be flushed. That would then go off to a biocontainment, and I do not know how they disposed of the liquid. We were never told. We were just told that it was disposed of appropriately. Anything that was alive in there wouldn't have been alive. And then I was allowed out of the gantry. It was unlocked. I was allowed out of the gantry, and then I was slowly depressurized in the suit and allowed out of the suit. From there, I went through a medical examination. I had blood removed. I had to do the coughing, and they'd listen, and doing the thumping on my lungs, the auscultation, I think it's called, and then I would be allowed to debrief. From there, I would go up to one of the briefing rooms in back of the gallery, which was overlooking the clean sphere. And they had briefing rooms that were set in back of the gallery. I would then go through a debriefing, not that different from what this scenario is, and I would indicate where I had a problem with the removal, and I was supposed to fully debrief as to what occurred between myself and the JRod. And I gave about that much of it. And they knew it. And they didn't really push on me or anything like that, though. From there, I would then be taken up to level 4, back to the debriefing room, past the air curtains, back to the Aquarius debriefing room, and that is where we would plan what we were going to do with the samples which were removed. And sometimes we would immediately then get resuited up, go back through decon from 1 down to our pretend 4, or we would leave. And the samples were held for culture and allowed to be cultured up in level 3 before they would be brought down to 4 for microscopy or manipulation. So that gives you a pretty good idea what it was like. But everything was completely contained where nothing could get out into the environment. And it always gave me a freaky feeling when they would fill up the gantry, because I wondered what that liquid was. I knew that we were told it was a disinfectant.
But you wondered what it was.
And it was clear.
It was transparent.
It was transparent, but it was too viscous for normal water. It wasn't water with as a universal solvent or anything like that with something diffused into it. It was thick. It wasn't as thick as mineral oil, but it was somewhere between a light mineral oil and alcohol.
Okay.
And they gave the name, I'm sure, somewhere along the line what the name of it was, but I couldn't give it. Couldn't have cared.
But moving around, it didn't affect you because you were self-contained.
I was self-contained with a positive pressure going to that separate pressure unit from the outside of the clean sphere, not the clean sphere's pressure unit. And so there has to have been at least 3 separate positive pressure systems down there on that level. One for the gallery level to walk around and to walk around the clean sphere, one inside of the clean sphere that led out of the clean sphere for our positive pressure, and one to the gantry.
To the gantry itself.
Right. And I don't know what the schematics look like, what the pressure systems look like around the rooms we were in. I have no idea about that. I know it worked, though. Yeah. It never failed when I was in there or anything like that. The only thing that failed when I was in there was me and falling backwards, and it only happened once.
You caught your foot, didn't you, on part of the grating?
I still like this vision of it, of me standing there and doing everything right, and then him leaping in a mad gesture across the room. It didn't happen. I went to walk toward him. And he decided to step toward me as a joke. Now, when we would walk toward the JRod, I should explain that we were supposed to do so almost in a cadence like a Here Comes the Bride stepping,
and
single
a pause,
step.
And a single
That's
step.
right.
And then a single step.
Yes, we did not just walk across the floor, this graded floor. Well, I did a step toward him and nothing. I did a second step toward him and he did a step toward me, which was way out of bounds. It scared me so bad I stepped backward, and the grading on the floor was such that the side port to the clean sphere where the gantry would hook to, the grading was not parallel with the face of the doorway to enter into the clean sphere. It was off canter a bit.
Okay.
And it was more in line with where we were standing for the identification procedure. So when I stepped backward, I was drawing a perpendicular line to the direction of the grading as I would step backward. And so the grading was right up against my heels. And I think it was my right heel that I stumbled with. But I know that it was either my right heel or my left heel, because my other foot then got tangled up because I began to panic, simply because I never felt myself get stuck like that before in there. And I had him stepping forward at
the
me
same time.
at the same time, and I panicked. And when I panicked, I fell over backward onto the pressurization pouch, which contained the filters for the suit. And I had a hard time getting up, so I was kind of laying there, like I said, I was laying there like Dr. Vinkman that had been slimed in Ghostbusters, and kind of doing the weird cockroach routine, laying on my back. And he continued to step forward, and I didn't know it at that moment. And I had placed my hands to my sides because I was trying to set myself up. I had, at that point, my a person outside the gantry saying, Dan, are you okay? Dan, are you okay? When that was happening, I then had surveillance coming over and saying, what's the nature of the anomaly? They thought I had been hurt. Mm-hmm. That he may have said something to me or directed some sort of entrainment toward me and harmed me, that I was under attack, in essence. And I heard them saying something like, we're going to thump the repress. And I said, no, because what would have happened is I would have been fine. The pressurization on the outside of me would have changed. He would have been hurt.
Oh, yes.
They were going to intumesce him.
They were going to intumesce him to stop him.
They
thought he
if
was
necessary,
attacking.
they could have killed him.
Right.
And that's one thing that, before I go on what he did, that's one thing that was always, I never agreed with the bioethics or the morality of the issue. They were willing, knowing who he was, knowing that he was another human being, they were willing to sacrifice him for my life. Mm-hmm. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And the reason why I don't agree with that is this was the ambassador. I was the technician. And my life is no more precious than his. And he was here on special circumstances. What we were learning from him was vastly more important than what he was learning from us. So I disagreed with that ethic. But that ethic was cemented in there. And that's why I said, no, laying on my back, trying to set up.
Yeah.
Because they were saying, we'll go ahead and repress him. And he must have continued forward toward me while they were saying that. And I don't think he was able to hear what they were saying.
Okay.
And that's something I never spoke with him about, come to think of it. I never spoke with him about whether or not he could hear
their plan to
their communications going over my...
Your...
But at the same time, I figure he probably heard through my auditory sensors because he was thumping me constantly. I mean, you could feel it. It was like... When you were getting close to him,
You're shaking.
Was I there?
You're shaking. You okay?
Yeah, that is what
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
experiencing, thinking about it. And as I was saying, no, I kind of half sat up, and then I felt his hand touch me on my chest, and I felt him pull himself up onto me. So he was actually setting on me. He climbed up on top of me. Now I heard all hell break loose over the radio system. 2 was walking over 1, because whenever 2 would clip on, it would take precedence over, it would supersede the first channel, which contained the floor units, the beta units, the B team, the backup team, and the gallery observers. And that basically went to security and the wise men and any brass. And I'm not talking about generals brass, I'm talking about real brass, magi personnel that were there, had control over that. No offense to the military. But anyway, I don't want to start an inner...
No. Just,
The military inside the facility did not have juice over the top of the magi. We'll put it to you that way. We ran the facility. And the security for them ran it for them. And I say we because of the short period of time that I had a number, and I'm supposed to say it that way. We ran the facility. But as he climbed up on my chest, I felt him entrain me to relax, and I lost care of the proprioceptors for my arms. At the time, I couldn't feel my arms for some reason. And so I nearly panicked again and that would have really looked great to the people on the outside, because my arms were swinging around. Taken down by a 3-foot JRod. But
it was like a turtle on your back and a JRod sitting on top of you.
And the next thing I felt is I felt myself fall into his eyes. And I asked questions immediately. The first question, I kind of felt like that gnome on the commercials that we see, where he says, "Am I going to die?" I asked whether or not I was dying. And the next thing I felt was calm come over me. The endorphins went. And I felt very happy, very peaceful. Not in the same way as what I felt during the experience in 1981, though, with Father Orio, with the healing. This was something totally different. This was a biological, I had a shot of opiates.
Natural ones made by your brain.
Oh, yeah.
Were just kicked out.
Yeah, and it flooded me. It flooded me. I mean, I must have really been kicking them out, because I was on a high like you never
Well, you must have been
imagined.
terrified, because...
Not anymore.
But that's what I mean, to have generated that response, there must have been a great deal of fear.
Yeah, because he entrained to the level of fear, and then...
That gives you an idea of the level of fear.
The first thing I asked him about, I felt like I was standing in a room with him. It was almost like we had a sidebar. And I asked him where he was from, really. And he showed me what his planet looked like. It was very dank, very 1984-ish.
Okay.
With JRods walking in short lines, doing mining. And facilities that I have no idea what they were doing. I have absolutely no idea, because they were touching plates, they were touching panels that had no numbers or markings on them. They had simply segmented off geometric shapes. And then they were communicating back and forth with from panel to panel with these three-dimensional communications. And then I would see them look at each other and nod as if they were talking with one another. Totally foreign, totally alien. No, they didn't look like they had work shifts and going to eat lunch with lunch boxes and stuff. I mean, you know, I've heard a lot of nonsensical crap recently about that. This was nothing that you could put your finger on for normality.
Okay.
It was not Earth, and it was not how should I say, modeled after Earth, yet that's what they called it.
Okay.
They had numbers, and the number that he was showing me was number 4. So I imagine that was their so-called Sol number. So it was probably 2 Reticulum 4 that I was looking at the time. The outside was hyper bright, hyper orange in the sky, and it appeared to be hyper hot. I use the word hyper because that's what it felt like that I was feeling from him. But there was nothing of normality, and I asked him what this place was, and he said Earth to me in English in my head. And I said, we're on Earth, and he said, this is our Earth. So that may have meant that was his way of describing it to me, or it may have meant that that's what they really called it. I don't know. I don't know, and I didn't ask him at the time, because as soon as I grabbed a hold of myself emotionally but calmed, what would I have done but begin asking questions? And I did. And he said that part of our time was for him to look at my land, my world, my Earth. And so I shared a few things from him of the time when I was a boy at Yosemite.
Okay.
And showed him some of the beauty, that some of the things that I consider beautiful here. What he was showing me on the outside was what he actually considered was the most beautiful there. And to me, it was so arid and so frightening, it wasn't beauty to me. But the thing is when I showed him the trees here, he didn't have that reaction about, as I had a reaction toward his world. He breathed in, and it was like I freed him for a moment, and he started screaming wonderful at me. I then asked a question that I'm not going to get into here, not even in this debriefing, about Christ, because I knew that he was a traveler, and he was telling me about times of stepping back in Earth's history and what he was learning from the other JRods that went through cultural exchange. No, not us going elsewhere, but cultural exchange, meaning within their society, them being allowed to transfer back to a period in our early history, and them being exchanged from there to here to observe or to interact. And the majority of what he was learning from the people from whence he was learning were from people previous to him, the 45s. Because he was here actually as part of an exchange to learn from the 45s what they were planning on doing.
Okay.
Like I said, human beings lie to one another. He was a double agent. He was fit in with the 45s as kind of, you know, he didn't stick out like a sore thumb, basically, but he stuck out a little bit, but they considered him a little bit queer because he was a scientist.
So they just kind of accepted it, and
Yes.
he was learning from the inside
Yes.
about them.
Yeah, and then he showed me several other trips back from other individuals as well as his own.
Maybe we should leave those trips and those experiences for the next
All right.
session. Okay.
It's where America keeps its most secret secrets. Everyone knows it's there, but no one will tell you what goes on inside its barbed wire perimeter. The rumors are wild. We went to Area 51 in search of the truth. This is as close as you're ever going to get to dreamland. The government says it doesn't exist, but they will shoot to kill if you cross the line. This is here to keep the secrets of dreamland locked out of sight. A high-security perimeter with parabolic microphones, electronic sensors, and a heavily armed security force. Inside the compound, some of the world's most closely guarded secrets. Certainly, the next generation of military research and development. But some people believe there's even more. U.S.-built flying saucers using extraterrestrial technology. The research allegedly is based on alien spacecraft and cadavers stored in a man-made cavern deep below Area 51.
It's the biggest story in the universe if it's true. It's the biggest story in human history if it's true.
George Knapp is a TV anchor turned investigative journalist who's been researching Area 51 for years.
Area 51 has been the location of choice for our blackest projects, the most secret projects our U.S. military has going. The U-2, the SR-71, stealth fighter, all sorts of CIA monkey business. It's been the spot. I've interviewed people who worked there in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s who have told me basically the same story, that there are craft up there, that they're disc-shaped, classic flying saucer-looking vehicles. They don't know exactly where they come from. I realize most of it is complete nonsense, but there seems to be a core of information that's intriguing.
The years of hard work paid off. Recently, Knapp acquired an extraordinary document, a document so secret it has never before been seen in public. It's the government's official handbook for Area 51, a thick publication for a place that doesn't exist.
I got the manual through an independent source. Why do I know it's real? I can't tell you.
It's a detailed guide that explains the facility building by building, including the mysterious Hangar 18, the place rumored to hold a 10-story underground facility packed with every piece of alien technology ever recovered.
It says that it's not to be removed from the base, but somebody clearly removed it. It lists, in the case of an intrusion, where the security forces are supposed to go, what their priorities are. It gives us an insight into what goes on at the base that we've never had before.
There are so many UFOs spotted near Area 51 that a year ago, the state of Nevada renamed nearby Interstate 375 the Extraterrestrial Highway. The secret base has even found its way into popular culture with a video game. In the absence of real information, outlandish rumors multiply like weeds.
Stories in the past dealt with that they were here eating abducted children and genetically engineering AIDS and all sorts of wild things. But when you dig down deep, there is a small percentage of these stories from credible people who have claimed to work on saucer programs that they're not so easily dismissed.
Until recently, the many Area 51 watchers could hike up a hill called Freedom Ridge and look down into the Groom Lake bed with its 6-mile runway and enormous aircraft hangars. But that's no longer possible.
Our government has seized 4,000 acres of land strategically located around the base so that American citizens can't look down on it. Yet, we've signed this thing called the Open Skies Treaty that allows any signatory nation in the world to fly over this and take all the pictures at once. Who's the enemy?
What happens if you decide to drop in on the good folks of Area 51? We decided to find out. Our guide, astronomer and author, Chuck Clark.
We're going to go east up Highway 375 for about 19.8 miles till we get to a dirt road up there. And then we're going to go 14 miles off-road back to the Area 51 main entrance. For certain, we'll find security forces watching us.
It was dark when we arrived at the ridge closest to the installation. Still 11 miles away from the base, Clark has been down this road many times before. Now he believes we've been spotted by government security.
Right now, there happens to be a white Jeep Cherokee up on top of the hill ahead of us, about a quarter mile away up there watching us. He has capabilities to use a parabolic mic, which is highly accurate up to in excess of a half a mile. Very likely he's listening to us and hearing us as clear as anyone would standing right here.
Our night vision gear allowed us to see the elaborate security system. Signs warned us that the guards were authorized to use deadly force. And then, out of nowhere, we were confronted.
Now they're going to shine their little spotlight around on us.
What are they doing right here? What are they trying to do?
Maybe they thought they'd intimidate us away by coming up and shining bright lights on us. If we were to take one step across that line, they'd be very happy to come up and put a gun in our ear and talk to us a lot. It's a matter of playing cat and mouse with them. Yeah, we won this little skirmish, and they'll regroup and they'll come back and maybe try another one.
Once you've covered this story, you don't go back to covering City Hall. Our leading cutting-edge physicists are talking about parallel universes, alternate dimensions. Area 51 is sort of like Brigadoon, that mythical city that appears out of nowhere. You go up there to see what you want and you see it. The reality of it is we don't know exactly what they're saying.
If anyone knows what's really going on in Area 51 and is ready to talk, please contact us.
One astronomer estimates there may have been as many as 100 million civilizations since the universe began. How unlikely is it then that we have been visited by one of them?
Tim White. The alleged crash of an extraterrestrial spacecraft near Roswell, New Mexico has become the touchstone of modern ufology. Hard evidence remains elusive as years of speculation and theory have all come up just a little bit short. Now, a sheaf of documents that surfaced more than a decade ago is leading some experts to believe that not only have extraterrestrials visited our planet, but also that the U.S. government has known about it from day one.
If one accepts for even a moment the premise that we've been visited, that an alien was here, that bodies have been found, there would have to be a control group established to examine, understand, and determine what the makeup of it is and what the motivations are and what our vulnerability is.
UFO investigator Jamie Chanderay believes that proof of just such a group does exist in the form of authentic-looking documents sent to him on film in December 1984. The film, whose sender is unknown to this day, contained astounding images, pages from a 1952 briefing document meant for President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower. The memo describes a secret government UFO team working on the Roswell crash, a shadow cabinet codenamed Majestic, or MJ-12. This document also informs Eisenhower about the discovery of wreckage and alien bodies near Roswell. Explosive revelations delivered to Chandray by an anonymous source.
It was very interesting to me because it was analogous to Watergate in the sense that there was a deep throat who wanted to share information. And ultimately that process led to the arrival of the MJ-12 documents.
More documents were to follow, and Chandray suspects he was chosen to receive them because he was known within the intelligence community as a fair and impartial investigator of UFO phenomena.
I'm a skeptic. You have to be a skeptic. You can't simply buy out. This isn't a belief system. It has nothing to do with a belief system. It isn't a religion. That's not what we're dealing with. If it exists, then there's a way to prove it. And that's what the game is all about.
Physicist Bruce Maccabee believes the MJ-12 documents are significant, but he's holding out for hard evidence.
You can have sightings up the wazoo. You can always get an expert to explain it, even if he has to hoke up an explanation. Now, if MJ-12 is real, their main problem was keeping track of the hardware so that we could study it, learn it, without letting the absolute proof get out. Remember, it's the absolute proof. It's the bodies and hardware that cannot be duplicated here on Earth, which conclusively proves this stuff is real.
The government's a multi-headed dragon, and sections of that change every 4 years. So you have this constant change going on of musical chairs. So if a group is going to indeed control this information in some fashion, it has to be a group that is in place continuously. With that kind of control comes the danger always. Well, who watches the watchers? Forget the motivations of the aliens for a moment. What's the motivations of those that control the information?
Veteran UFO researcher Stanton Friedman believes that MJ-12 would have been motivated to keep quiet about advanced alien technology in order to protect national security in the tense Cold War standoff following World War II.
There was a real belief in Washington that when Stalin got ready, he would attack. There was a general consensus that we were going to be in a battle to the end with the Soviet Union. And therefore, any kind of technological advantage we could get would be well worth having, and you couldn't possibly release that information to anybody.
In researching his book on the Majestic 12 documents, Friedman meticulously verified every detail within the Eisenhower document. He investigated each supposed member of the group and found that they were the best and brightest military minds of the day, including Secretary of Defense James Forstall, high-ranking Army, Navy, and Air Force officers, and the first 4 directors of Central Intelligence. Only one name on the list didn't seem to fit. Publicly, MJ-12 member Dr. Donald Menzel was an astronomer at Harvard and a rabid UFO debunker.
Menzel, in his position at Harvard, was in a perfect position to act as the astronomer telling the world this is all nonsense. Nothing to do with anything. This isn't real. We've got explanations for everything, which is what he did say.
And I have found that his explanations are just plain wrong when you analyze them carefully. As a matter of fact, you get the impression that here was a top-notch scientist treating this subject totally unscientifically, trying to think up anything that he could do to snow the public, as it were, with an explanation, even if it made no sense.
You know, you might seem, well, why would he be lying? Why would he do this? And others who defend him say, oh, he wouldn't do this and he wouldn't do that. Well, of course he would. He absolutely would, as would every single one of those individuals, and they wouldn't tell their wives or anything else. Because that was what was important for their country.
Along with the Eisenhower briefing document, both Chandray and Friedman have found cryptic references to MJ-12 in declassified government documents, but nothing has bolstered the authenticity of MJ-12 more than this. More anonymous films sent to ufologist Don Berliner in 1994. On it, a supposed military field manual dated 1954.
This was a set of instructions, really, to retrieval teams who would be at the scene soon after an event took place in which a saucer had crashed and in which there were bodies and wreckage. How to wrap them, what kind of boxes to use, where to send the pieces, what the cover stories were. And one of the things that comes through loud and clear is they wouldn't have put such a manual together unless this had happened more than once. Which makes you wonder, so how many of the crashes were there? How many bodies were retrieved?
For verification of the new manual, Friedman turned to a former colleague, retired McDonnell Douglas scientist Dr. Robert Wood. If Wood, an expert in the detection of forged documents, could authenticate the manual, Friedman felt he would have proof of a government alien conspiracy.
My initial reaction when I first saw them was if this is genuine, why it's dynamite, like the smoking gun.
Dr. Wood was painstaking in his examination of the document pages, comparing it to an authentic Army field manual from the same period. The size of both manuals was identical, conforming to the standard 6:9 ratio for government field manuals of the era. And Dr. Wood examined this seal, which other experts insist is proof that this manual is a fake.
If you look at the front of this document, at the bottom, there's a logo that says War Department. And the War Department was actually eliminated at the end of World War II. So you'd expect they would have stopped using the logo. But in fact, the Army, in its field manuals, continued to use the War Department logo up until as late as 1960. And we have exact copies of such manuals.
These documents are genuine. They prove the case. You don't need anything more.
And, Friedman says, we are not the only ones who will suffer from continued secrecy.
I think one of the reasons they're coming here is to make sure we don't go out, to take our brand of friendship, namely hostility, other places. This is truly a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. So I don't think we can expect aliens to deal with us as equals. We're not. We haven't earned our place at the Galactic Federation Round Table.
Both Stanton Friedman and Jamie Chandray believe the clandestine Majestic 12 still exists today. Chandray also told Sightings that he believes the U.S. Air Force will soon release MJ-12 documents of its own, which will profoundly change the way the world views the UFO phenomenon.